Hello, everybody, and welcome to IMAL. For those that we haven't crossed before, my name is Lucía García. I'm the General Director of IMAL, and I'm very pleased to have you all here. Especially, I'm very pleased to initiate this collaboration with FARI along the past months since my arrival here in Brussels and in this project. I've been looking for expertise and partnerships around that could bring in some knowledge to other things that we do here. And we hope that from now on we can not only start a dialogue, but also get into action with some productions. I already have in mind a few projects in which we will for sure try these collaborations, art science, of course. And yeah, I mean, for me, it's a very, very important first step that we're taking tonight. And I will not extend myself anymore. I'm just express my happiness to have you all here. And I will pass on the floor to Carl, who will introduce all the speakers tonight. And then we will open the floor also for the audience to participate in any possible way. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Lucia. Thank you also to all the people, wonderful people who made it possible. Jackie, Laurence, and all the team at IMAL. So thank you very much. So it's my pleasure today to have a very nice panel where we really try to mix artists, scientists, and sometimes intertwined perspectives. My name is Carl Mörch. I co-direct FARI. It's a research institute created by the two universities, Université Libre de Bruxelles and Vrije Universiteit Brussel. And what we do is we try to connect researchers from the two universities who work in or around AI and to have them work, collaborate with local entities in Brussels. So soon you will be able to visit us also. We are above the central station in Brussels, and really our goal is to try to create more dialogues, projects between our expertise in the technological domains, but also with other fields, and art is one that a lot of us want to explore a bit more. And this workshop was proposed after a conversation we had with Lucia, where we were talking about the fact that a lot of artists sometimes, according to Lucia, or in general, sometimes would like to know more about the technologies, do not necessarily have access to the people to do so, might sometimes also have creations or do art around it without maybe having had the chance of chatting with the people who create these technologies or develop them. And on the other side, what we saw is that is also that scientists might sometimes have predefined notions or ideas of what art can bring to the field of AI. So the goal is really today to try to have an interesting set of people who did and worked and try to reflect on what is the relationship between these two fields. And addressing this topic of AI and art immediately raises many questions. And so if you have opened a newspaper or been on the internet, you've seen about, of course, DALL-E and many other things where I think the question sometimes leads to very broad questions such as, is AI replacing artists? And these questions are sometimes so broad that it's really hard to answer with just even one clear sentence or one clear notion. And so let's go beyond that for tonight. We won't have one of these yes or no question. And in the background, really what we see is that there are many, many initiatives, projects where really artists and scientists collaborate and try to also bring the best to each other. So we will start with a small presentation by each one of the panelists, where in 2 minutes they can maybe introduce themselves and say why and what brought them to be interested in the topic. So Hugues, the floor is yours, our scientific director at FARI.
I need to take the microphone.
Yes, yeah. You need to take the microphone.
Yeah, take it like that. Right, you can hear me? Okay? No, not yet. What did I do wrong? Like this. Okay. I'm not as strong as you. Okay, so thanks to being here, and thanks Carl and Lucy to organize these things. So, well, 2 minutes, so I'm going to be short. So just The reason why I'm here is because perhaps I'm heading a lab on AI, and I know some of the members of this lab are here. The name lab is called IRIDIA, and I think Hugues Bono, entertained the day with some of his competence that we have at IRIDIA. So I'm interested in art because I met a lot of people doing interesting things with AI, and one of my friends that you all knows quite well so is a guy named François Pachet, who did the Beatles songs, a very interesting one, nice one called Daddy's Car. If you like Beatles, you can hear it. And I had a lot of discussion with him and other people that are doing and using AI as an interesting instrument to produce art. And interacting with those people, I decided 3-4 years ago, I think, to write a book called Can AI Generate Authentic Artists? It was a French book, so sorry for everyone who can't read French, but it's not hard to read one. And just rapidly, my answer was no. So definitely not. And well, there would be trivial things in this book that you wouldn't be surprised of. That obviously a software can't feel any emotion. A software is not in the world in the Heideggerian sense. When you make Heidegger somewhere, you raise the level, So Heidegger said that AI is not in the world, and so if you're not in the world, you can't produce any art because you're not interacting in a social way with people, etc. But that was not the most interesting part of the book. The most interesting part, and I would conclude, was that I feel a bit nostalgic about the good old-fashioned AI. I began AI in the 80s, and at that time, we were interested in writing codes. And we were interested in trying to understand the kind of rules, cognitive processes that goes in the head of people when we try to replicate the way they produce things, the way they think in order to produce things. And that was the good old-fashioned AI. I love this AI, and I must admit that I have a certain nostalgia for this AI. And those last 20 years, I've seen a big regression in my field, and art is one of those victims, where we're not anymore trying to code the rules, but we're trying to, at least we let the software learn the rules. And we feed the software with a lot of products like arts, music, whatever, and we don't even care about the rules. We let the software extract the rules out of the learning process. And for me, that is a big regression of AI, and perhaps also about art. That was the message of the book.
Johan Loeckx now?
Hello. I'm very grateful to be here, and I'm terribly nervous because it's a very difficult topic to talk about, and I wondered whether I would come as an artist or as a researcher. And actually, I did research in AI and on music. I'm a songwriter and so on. But what I really care about is that our mindsets change and that the human learns, both AI researchers from appreciating and understanding art, but also artists from interacting with these systems, which is, I think, for many the primary reason to be in AI is also to gain a better understanding of ourselves from the world or anything you try to study. And that's also what I took from my research in AI and music. Is that I learned a lot about music, also about AI, but this went nowhere, but I hope we'll see what the rest of the discourse brings.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Geraint?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Geraint Wiggins. My job title is Professor of Computational Creativity, so I'm interested scientifically in the parts of artificial intelligence which relate to creative intelligence. In fact, I would go further than that. I would say that actually intelligence is creativity, at least when it's at its best, it's creativity. I'm also a musician. I have doctorates in both, and I am a composer. So I like to think I'm a creative person myself. I try to be creative occasionally. And I think what really brings me here and indeed to my job, so what we're doing today is really my job, it's what I spend my whole life doing, is that as an AI scientist who is interested, like Hugues, in cognitive science, I'm interested in cognitively motivated AI that tells us about humans, right? And as an artist, I think the big intersection between those two things is that both of them are fundamentally about what it means to be human. So I see my research on both sides of what I do, the artistic side and on the scientific side, as being trying to understand the fundamental nature of humanity. And I think that's really what we're talking about a lot today. And I think that's probably enough.
Yes, thank you. Elena?
Hello, my name is Helena Nicanole. I'm a new media artist and independent curator. And I've been working with artificial intelligence as a tool, but also as a concept over the last 7 years. I worked with AI and text, also AI and sound, with computer vision and AI and visuals. And I always like to be such a trickster as an artist. I think it's a privilege of being an artist and being a trickster. So we can have different perspective on AI and on technologies in general. So we can have a critical perspective, but also we can next time have some post-human approach, or like work in the context of AI or technologies as innovation. And later I started curating exhibitions also, and I did 3 exhibitions on AI and art. And the last one is still open in Istanbul till 11th of February. You can visit it. That's it.
All right. Eve from Canada.
Hey, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm a legal researcher. The reason why I'm here today, I think, it's because I wrote a piece recently about what legal options artists may have when their work is used to train generative AI. I was mainly trying to answer 2 questions under Canadian law. The first one being, I wondered if artists could sue for reproduction of their work in the database. Interestingly, since I wrote this piece, 2 lawsuits have been brought on that topic. You might have heard of a class action brought in San Francisco by 3 artists, and another one that is to be filed quite soon by Getty Images in the UK. And so that was the first question I wanted to answer. And the second one was whether or not artists could sue for reproduction of their work, for imitation of their work, which is possible in Canada as opposed to what's possible as opposed to the United States, for instance. And the conclusion of the piece was that artists have valid claim, but that their chances of success is hard to predict because these are all new questions. Both sides have valid and interesting argument, and it's going to be a big legal battle. But artists seldom have deep pockets, while tech companies do have a lot of money. So this is going to be an issue. But this is why also the Getty Images lawsuit might be interesting, because they are probably the ones who can make valid, like, brought these arguments in a good way in front of the courts.
All right, thank you. So thank you all for doing your small presentation. So Hugues, you're not shy of sometimes having strong opinions. So I will start with you. You asked the question, can AI generate authentic artists? I want to start with 2 basic questions. What do you mean by authenticity? And the second question that was asked by one of my colleagues who is also an artist, what do you mean by artist?
Whoa. Give my micro to Johan.
I sent the question before.
Whoa. Well, the book was all about that. You're trying to. I'm not an artist myself, and I'm not even a philosopher of art. I'm a computer scientist like Geraint and Johan, and I try to, as a computer scientist, to reflect about those, definition about authenticity. Let's first start with authenticity, because in the 80s, and perhaps Geraint remember that because he's nearly my same age, that already asked was kind of question, because there was I remember computer scientists whose name was, it was the good old-fashioned AI at the time. So the computer scientist was trying to write rules, you know, the codes of art. In fact, there is an interesting French expression called les règles de l'art, and I like this expression because I don't think it has the same meaning in English, rules of art, but in French, you know, it sounds well, you know, les règles de l'art. And in fact, art is full of rules. You know, when you're a musician, you have some rules of musical composition. When you're a painter, when you do poetry, you have some rules to respect. And so back in time in the 80s, there was I remember an artist, well, a computer scientist called, am I right, Geraint, if you remember, because you're more interested in this field than I, Harold Cohen, who wrote, you remember that, a code called Haron, and in fact, he was trying to produce painting, but by writing the rules, and I love that a lot. And I remember at the time discussing with one of my favorite still British philosopher, Maggie Bowden, and she wrote a book about creativity, and she defined art as, you know, at least had three kind of you know, basic criteria. One of them was originality. Another one was trying to give sense, you give meaning to what you were doing, you know, and this is definitely what I believe is more and more missing in the current artistic production, because in fact. And it's interesting to make the connection with law, because in fact we're not trying to, you know, explicit the rules of art. We're just trying to replicate and plagiar, make a full plagiar of the existing, you know, artistic products. And so I think that we're definitely less and less authentic. I believe that, you know, in the 80s people were trying to build software which was trying to be original, novelty, creative. And this is less and less the case, because, you know, we're feeding neural networks and big machine with those, you know, art products, and we're not even trying to understand all those things has been produced, you know. We're just trying to find, in a kind of learning process, the rules out of those production. And that, you know, I just repeat what I said firstly. Well, an artist, you know, I don't have a real definition, but I remember giving this, I would just tell an anecdote. But according to me, more and more the art is being accompanied, and that is a little bit related to what Carl was asking initially, you know, are we computer scientists aware of what is going on in the artistic world? And I've tried to be a little bit more aware than I was 10 years ago, and I realized that the art is evolving in a way that needs a kind of interesting narrative. An artist, you know, beyond his works, whatever, more and more you need to have an exciting, original, interesting, even conceptual narrative. And this is definitely what is absent in AI, because the kind of only narrative we have these days, you put a lot of Beatles songs, and you can have randomly mixing those, you can have a new Beatles songs. This is what I was saying to Francois, you know, you mix a little bit of Michel and Yesterday, and you have a Beatles song, but what's the shit, you know? And okay, what is original in that? And this is a very poor narrative, you know, saying, okay, you put a neural network with a lot of piece of music, and I think this is really what is, you know, to some extent missing to AI. And I was very surprised. I gave this a little conference, I think it was 2 years from now, and there was an exhibition of Brancusi. I didn't know Brancusi. He's a sculptor. I don't know if you know him. He's a sculptor, Romanian sculptor, living in Paris. And I was visiting this exhibition, and it will be my definition of an artist. I was visiting this exhibition of Brancusi, and there was a famous sculpture of him called The Kiss. It's a very fascinating sculpture. It's a very primitive one. It's a kind of naive one where you see the woman and the man, but you don't even guess who is the woman and the man. But it's really, you know, you feel this sculpture with a lot of emotion. And in fact, but you feel it even more emotionally because there was a guide, a woman who was very well aware, and she was very knowledgeable about Brancusi, and she told the story of his sculpture. And the story of his sculpture was that Brancusi was a disciple of Rodin, because he was trained in a Rodin, you know, atelier, and so he worked a lot with Rodin, but he was obsessed by Rodin because Rodin create his own kiss. But if you look at Rodin's sculpture, it's so precise, you know, it's so well organized, it's so well defined, that at the end, you know, Brancusi exploded of rage, you know, to see those things. And he wanted to create something totally different, but also, you know, that was a result of his anger. And there's a lot of contradiction with Rodin, and he created this piece of art. And if you didn't know the story, knowing the story, it was even more strong what you feel in, you know, in seeing this sculpture. And I believe that this is what is really missing in AI, and which is the definition of an artist. You being fed with Rodin, And then you create this incredible sculpture, which is a very naive kiss, but it is in opposition to that. Because Brancusi lived that. He was in the social world of Rodin. He wanted to be subversive. And that is my definition of art.
Thank you. And I think this leads me to you, Elena, because we talked a bit before. And in your work, you've explored, utopian and dystopian perspectives about AI. So you use art and AI, I think, to both look at each other. And you also described to me the fact that you use AI as a tool. And as an artist, maybe can you elaborate on the relationship that you have with AI as a tool, and how do you use it?
Yes, sure. But first, I want to add something to the previous question. I want to give my definition of what artist is. I think it's a still person, or let's say some agent, because I also thought maybe animals could also produce art. I mean, monkeys, right? I think it's possible, but not AI yet. Yeah, but I would say it's a person or agent which is conveying some concept or ideas within some specific artistic language or artistic means of communication. And if we talk about AI, definitely it doesn't have concept or idea. And of course, art is not just beautiful images, right? Which we see online with all these text-to-image generators. And as about me, I started working with artificial intelligence and texts, and I was fascinated because I just started experimenting, and I realized that it's something completely different from text generators like Markov chains or other text generators, because it was capable to imitate this style, and I started to feed it with the big data. Like I collected data set of sacred texts, let's say, and it started producing some kind of poetry, and it was very beautiful. And but then I thought what I can do with this, and I was fascinated by Internet of Things and the idea that we can hack them through, we can hack some devices through internet, and we can send some messages through internet to these devices. And then I created this work which is called Deus Ex Machina. I was hacking devices on Internet of Things. And I created, let's say, okay, I created algorithm which was triggering neural networks, generating this pseudo sacred text, and then this algorithm was hacking IP cameras all over the world, and these cameras, they were talking to people with this AI generated text. And I had another algorithm which was hacking IP printers all over the world, and these printers were printing this AI generated text. So that was my first project with AI. And then I did many different projects. Another thing which I did was broad language project. I decided to experiment with AI and sound. And I was just playing around with different approaches, different architectures, and I was feeding it with different sounds. And then I realized that it was producing interesting aesthetics, like interesting sound aesthetics, some glitchy things, and then, because I was also feeding it with sounds of birds, I realized that if AI was capable with natural language to learn grammar, to produce this, to build a model of grammar, I thought maybe it could also build a grammar, or to learn grammar, to learn some patterns from bird language. And then I started this big project on bird language, and I thought about AI as this mediator between people and birds, which was capable to help us to understand birds. So we were working with researchers on this AI translator from bird language to human language and vice versa. And to me, this project, if we talk about different approaches also, the first project was more critical one, and the second project was more in this post-human context, because I realized that artificial intelligence, when it works with big data, it can learn some patterns which we cannot see as humans, because we are not capable to understand these kind of patterns in big data. And so yes, I thought that AI as this non-human agent is a good tool which can help us to understand other unhuman agents. Yeah, that is about my approaches.
And maybe thank you very much, and this leads me to you, Johan. And because you have also put forward the fact that you have somewhat two hats, a bit like Geraint as well. And maybe can you define or at least share how you use your knowledge and your expertise in AI versus your knowledge and your also mastery of maybe music, and does it feed each other, and how do you see the relationship between these two compartments of your brain, or maybe it's only one?
Sorry, I tried to steal your microphone. So maybe, so I tried, it's almost 10 years ago, to build kind of grammars, so it was a symbolic AI technique for analyzing music. And actually it was in the context of education. So you have indeed often rules, or if you need to learn about music, you typically start with the more well-defined challenges, so you can, where the rules apply, and then once you create, you're free to do whatever you like, of course. And so I analyzed Vrije Jacques, a very simple song, it seems, and I tried to write down all the things that I know about this song and what I feel as a human, and try to formalize it, as we call it, put it into well-defined, unambiguous statements about this song. And this was a very interesting moment for me, because I knew a lot about the song, but it also showed me the limitations of the musical thinking, because it's only in one, it's in one key, but also one chord, this song. While if you listen to it, like Vrije Jacques, here, it feels that you move to a different chord, but it doesn't. So there is a concept, we miss, the musical language is not expressive enough. And so this is what I think is very interesting, how the different view, the formalized computer science or whatever the new perspective gave me a lot of musical insights. And I think this is why I like this interdisciplinary, AI is always interdisciplinary, approaches, because they improve my thinking or my sophistication of thinking, both in music and in AI.
All right, very interesting, thank you. What about you, Geraint? Because I feel like there are a lot of similarities, and also as a professor in computational creativity, what is your take on it?
Yes, okay, you might have to stop me, okay. First of all, I would like to make a distinction between art and creativity. My job title is computational creativity, specifically because creativity is, like intelligence, a property of what humans can do. It's rather difficult as a property to study, because you can't really see it until after it's happened, like intelligence, right? It's what philosophers call an ex post. Ex post, that's the word. Yes, an ex post phenomenon. So, the color, for example, this is green. That's a property of that stool there. On the other hand, intelligence is a property which is demonstrated by action. and creativity is the same. Okay, fine. So that makes it philosophically rather difficult. And it means that art and creativity are two fundamentally different things, and that would be the first really big point I wanted to make today, because very, very often those two things are conflated and people assume they're the same. They're absolutely not. There are lots and lots of things that we do that are creative that are not considered to be art, such as mathematics, for example. Many people, I mean, I do consider mathematics an art, but very many people do not. Right? Engineering, many people do not consider an art, but it is certainly creative. It has to be, most of the time. Of course, most things that we do, even art, are not creative all the time, right? Okay, so that's an important point. And then going on from there, creativity is a property of humans. It's a property of some other species as well, very clearly, but particularly humans. We value it an awful lot. We hang the results of it on the wall, or we sit and listen to them. We pay lots of money for them. We care about creativity. We care about novelty, and we care about quality, and we care about how we feel. And all of those things are exhibited in the results of human creativity, even in the ones that are not normally thought of as art, right? Like a bridge. Right? We don't think of building a bridge as art, we think of it as engineering. But quite often, bridges are beautiful things, right? One way or another. And they're certainly clever things, so they can be beautiful in that way. Okay, where am I going with this? Right, so then what's that got to do with AI? Well, one of the thing we're fundamentally trying to do in AI is to understand how minds, and I do mean minds, not brains, process information. Okay, now, I said minds, not brains. There is a relationship between the mind and the brain, obviously, unless you believe some stuff that most people don't believe anymore. Indeed. So, from my perspective, what I'm trying to do is to build systems which explain what is going on when a human is doing one of these things, this class of things that we call creative, that we can spot after it's happened. Okay, so then what does that involve? It involves trying to understand the structure of a system, as Hugues was saying, writing down rules, perhaps, or perhaps looking at the results of something, maybe somebody else's pictures, and trying to understand what the structure in those pictures is that makes them special. And then trying to infer what the process might have been that produced those structures. That's how what many people call AI, incorrectly, it's actually big data science, works when you're talking about generative systems. So what many people call big data AI is actually only a part of AI. And AI has been going on for, what, 70 years now? More than 70 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah?
This conference was in 56.
Yeah, right. And much of it isn't about big data. Okay, so that's an important thing to remember. And there are very many good systems out there that can do creative things, things that other humans deem to be creative, which are absolutely not to do with big data. So an example of that would be the HR mathematics system. Okay, so I won't go into lots of detail now because it would take too long. But HR generates integer sequences of whole numbers. Okay, now you may not think that's very creative, and I can understand why you would think that. Mathematicians, on the other hand, care a lot about integer sequences. And there are particular integer sequences that have particular mathematical properties. Yeah? So a program was written about 25 years ago now, which is capable of generating integer sequences which are interesting to mathematicians and explaining why they are interesting. And this is something which, from a mathematician's perspective, is intensely creative. This thing is good enough that it's even got a paper in a journal about integer sequences explaining 3 of its important sequences. And it's discovered 14 altogether, which are listed in the Encyclopedia of Integer Sequences, which apparently is something that does it for mathematicians, not for me personally, but there you go. Each to their own. So creativity, which is the thing I'm most interested in, can be artistic, and usually is, but can be something else. And importantly, it's a process, it's part of a process which we find in brains and minds. And in order to study it, I think we need to study brains and minds, which is why, like Hugues, I am not particularly convinced by data science models as creativity. I am convinced by them as creative tools in the way that you use them, and I really like that approach, because then we have a human who's actually being creative, who's making creative decisions, and the AI is supporting, stimulating, generating, or whatever. I'll stop there for now, yeah? Okay.
Thank you, and it also leads to the fact that in all the definitions of what intelligence means or artificial intelligence is, we never see the notion of creativity, and it's all about problem resolution most of the time, and operations that do not, I think, take into account different aspects of what the human experience can be about. And maybe that leads to a question for you, Eve, also, because you've touched upon some of the legal questions that are really important now, but also hearing all the people here, can you maybe give us some insights on what are the big legal questions now when it comes to the relationship between AI and art? And specifically, we've talked, and I think this was one of the many examples of generative AI. So could you maybe share some of your views on what are the key questions that we might think of or should think of from the legal perspective?
Yeah, of course. And I think that the main question is really the fact that for generative AI, there's no secret to it. You have to train your model on the art and the work of previous artists. So it's basically just ripping off other people's work in order to create new forms of art. Are they really pieces of actual art or not? That's a question. Is it merely reproduction, as Hugues has hypothesized, or is it something new that has been created either by the machine or by the person behind its computer? Because I think there's that element that is interesting with generative AI, such as DALL-E, for example. Of course, it's not creative. Like, we all agree on that. It's absolutely not creative. And the goal definitely isn't to replace artists. It really shouldn't be what we're talking about, I think. However, it may help people who are creative, but not skillful, who aren't good to craft things, to draw things, to make sculpture. These people who have plenty of ideas, but who cannot make them live, then these tools might enhance and increase their creativity. And while Helen is lucky enough to be both very creative and very skillful, so she can make outstanding arts, I was fascinated by your work, because exactly, you're creative and good and artistically skilled, so you make amazing things. But I think that we may see new kind of artists rising up with those new technologies. And the key thing that we have to think as people wonder about legal questions, how can we empower these new people without ripping off actual artists who are doing the job today, and making sure that we can protect them and they can still make a living out of their work.
Thank you. And it's, I think I have a group question that is always a bit dear to me. It's when we talk about, and we're knee deep in a topic all day long, every hour of the day, and when we talk about AI and art, we might always hear the same, sentences, cliche images, things that come over and over and over. So I gave at the beginning the example of, is AI replacing artists? This is a question that keeps popping up. Do we have a clear answer now after hearing all of you? No. But that is not the goal. But my question to you is there something that you keep hearing in the debate about AI and art that is rubbing you the wrong way, or something that you want to change or not hear anymore?
I would just move on with what Eve was saying, and also what Hélène was saying. I was criticizing a bit of what is happening in AI these last 20 years, but I'm still admit that it's a fascinating instrument, you know. And I remember, thanks to François Pachet, had a discussion with Stromae that we all know. And Stromae used a lot of AI in his last album. He's a fan of Cap Verde music, as you may know. I'm not myself a fan of him, but must admit that he's pretty successful here in our country, but also internationally. And he was discussing with François, and he was telling that he was very fascinated by using AI, you know, proposing things. And because he was a fan of music from Cap Verde, he doesn't have the imaginative power that the AI had to propose things, you know, to mix things, and you know, I discussing with François. I also remember that François was showing me things that, you know, you can play the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven in a bossa nova way, or you know, a song by Frank Sinatra, or you know, or in the Ennio Morricone, and that is really stimulating. You know, I fully admit that when you see that, you know, wow, you're Frank Sinatra singing this Ninth Symphony, and it's really great. You know, and but obviously no one is not the real Frank. It's just you know, a mixing in an interesting way. Well, interesting, no, because Stromae was selecting, because at the end, you know, there is the artist who say, wow, that piece is interesting, and this is the real movement that is missing to AI. The moment when there is someone who say, wow, this one I like, and this is a secret moment, you know, and just to move on a little bit with this creativity that Geraint was alluding to. I remember seeing a video on YouTube on the Go game, you know, and in fact the video was AI has become very creative. And just to you know, move on with what Geraint was saying, and in fact there's been a move in Go that has been called by the Go player, you know, who's been defeated by AI this last 5 years, very creative, because he played in a very unusual way Go. And in fact, you know that the champion of Go, a famous Korean called Lee Sedol, was being defeated. And I was kind of shocked, you know, by seeing this creativity associated with this Go move. And in fact, it was a new way of playing Go. In fact, even for me, it's kind of regression in the Go player, because even Lee Sedol, the champion, he doesn't understand any longer how to play Go, because he has to, even himself, he has to relearn, because AI has invented new way of play Go. But Go is not the same thing as art for two main reasons. Go is a finite world. Then you could say that art also is a finite world, because you may have a finite number of possible songs because they have finite number of notes, or you may have a finite number of pixels in a 2D space. Whatever, you could say it's finite. But there is another thing which is really important that Go doesn't have and art has, is this wow movement, you know, the kind of a feeling you know, and you don't have this in Go, because in Go everything is defined, even the fitness. What is good in Go is objectivized. You can't objectivize Go. You can, you know what is a good play of Go, what is a bad one, even if it's long to define. At the end, you know that someone is winning and someone is losing. In art, this is definitely not the case. You know, you don't know what is a good thing. You know, and this is the wow movement. But I still believe is totally missing in AI, even if I keep repeating that. And what I like in what you were saying is that you straight away you give a very interesting narrative of what you were saying, and this is important. Otherwise, no one will understand what you were doing. You know? And the result of your production is also really associated with your explanation. If we don't get your explanation, we don't feel your artistic product. You know, and I feel this is really important, and this is why it's missing. And I feel I will finish on that. You know, I remember the portrait of Edmond de Bellamy. You know, this famous painting that was sold $500,000. In fact, Bellamy was an interesting reference to Goodfellow. Goodfellow is the guy who invented this generative adversarial neural network, the GAN. And in tribute to him, the painting was called Un Portrait d'Edmond Bellamy. It was sold, the first one, very nice portrait, was sold in a auction process, was sold at $500,000. What is interesting is that the second one was sold $5,000. And now the third one is sold $5. And why is that? Because everyone has understood the trick, you know, and the trick is not exciting anymore. The narrative is being, you know, vanished, you know, because the first one was interesting, but the third one is boring, you know. And I think AI is producing a lot of boring stuff these days.
Certainly agree with the last point. there are a few things, though, in there that I think can be discussed a bit more. The first one is about aesthetics in general. So if you're an expert Go player, then you probably have a more refined aesthetic for Go playing certainly than I do, because I have no idea how to play. And therefore, you can talk about Go in the same way that we can talk about art from an aesthetic perspective, maybe. So is there not a danger there that we're dismissing things simply because we don't have the right language or the right tests to apply? I mean, that's a question. But what I'd like to do, if we're in the business of challenging each other now, if I may challenge our Canadian colleague, whose name I'm sorry I didn't catch. First of all, there are two things that we talked about, that you just talked about there, which come up a lot in AI, and I think it's really worthwhile talking about them some more. The first one is, you said it's definitely not creative, and I'd like you to defend that. On what grounds is it not creative? And the second thing is, can you show me an artist that has not looked at other artists' work while they've been learning?
How is it not creative, first of all? I'd say that it only expresses what has been asked. So it can display creativity, but the creativity comes from the prompt.
So if I push a button, that's a creative act?
If you push a button,
well, that's the prompt, right?
Well, I mean, the sentence, you...
Okay, but there's plenty of generative artwork that does not involve having to type in a sentence, right? That has learned from big data, right? So that's one particular case.
But the person who created the data set has made choice.
Okay, they made a choice. But then if I say a sentence to you and you go off and make a painting that has been inspired by that sentence, you're not being creative, right?
The person who has said the sentence, or the person who paints?
The person who's painting.
Well, I think that there's a difference, a key difference that should be made here. If you say a sentence and I go and I paint it and I make an interpretation of your sentence, that's one thing. That feels to me like, and you're the expert in creativity, I am not, but that feels like creativity. On the other hand, if you tell me, go take your brush and paint this and this and that and that and that and do it like this, then that's not a painter who's being creative. It's a person who gives the direction. And that's the difference I would see.
Could I just respond to that one first? So I would go along with what you just said, but that is not what these systems do, right? These systems generate new material. They're not told how to generate that new material. They learn how to generate that new material for themselves. And they make all of the connections for themselves, right? So giving one of these systems a sentence, which it then uses to drive its process, is directly analogous with giving a sentence to an artist and saying, let this inspire you, right? So I propose, and don't take me wrong here, I'm not attacking you, I'm trying to create a debate. I propose here that you are being machinist. You are being biased against a machine because it is a machine, and your essential claim is that only humans can be creative.
Yeah, hey. No, thanks a lot for this. It's awesome. And thank you for taking questions during the panel. I think it's a really good thing. I wanted to propose a thought experiment that would illustrate your point a bit, which is, well, first of all, there's actually two things. One, that the AI is being trained on data, and for example, with things like the image, like creating images, there are a lot of complaints, probably you talked about this, that real artists are getting, the machine is studying the style of digital artists, and sometimes you can even see the signature of the artist come out, because, so there's some copyright issues there, and you know, with even being an artist, you know, it's a good artist is inspired, a great artist steal, you know. So it's an interesting topic, and we don't know yet exactly how to define the rules of this or the copyright. But the thought experiment I would propose is that right now, yes, you need an artist or a creative to come up with a prompt with a great idea. Give me Beatles with Bach and make a drawing out of it, and that's a creative act on itself, coming up with the prompt. But imagine a scenario in a few years when we have general artificial intelligence, and you tell the machine, hey, I want you to every day write a song that a list, and send that song to a list of 100 critics, music critics, and they will vote on your songs that you make, and the score, according to their score, that should train you to do the next song. And that's it. So you didn't give it any input on what... You can start by listen to what's popular. Now go. So you didn't give it any creative thought. It was very much a business decision. And it just used people's tastes to create music. So you actually didn't really give it any creative or artistic input or prompt. And it could generate potentially like an infinite amount of #1 hits on the radio. So I wanted to propose this. I don't know what is the answer or what is the question, but to propose this, and wanted to know what you guys think about that.
So we have Johan and then someone right.
Yeah, sorry. No, well, first of all, if the level of it's the listeners are in the loop. So if you're, and this is a particular effect of AI that I'm very afraid of, is that it will lower the human intelligence and will indeed be stupid enough to like computer music. But let's not talk about this future. But what's really, there is a very behaviorist focus. We're really focusing a lot here on the product, the output, and not looking at the mind indeed that's creating this art. And so it's a philosophical focus, and also very present in AI from its roots to look at intelligence from the outside of the box, judging intelligence by its behavior. And I think this is an important thing to be careful about, that it's, even if it's the same output, it doesn't mean that the agent who created it was equally intelligent. So
There is a reaction here, maybe also.
Hi.
Maybe after I could.
Okay, my question is more related also to your intervention, and because I have a philosophical background, so maybe I will switch this debate on creativity asking, it's not we're talking about creativity, so to speak, following commercial and more political narratives around AI, because, for example, companies or governments after this, like, oh my God, AI is going to replace all our tasks, human beings are not going to exist anymore. Now, no, we took it over, so now we are doing it properly, and AI is going to solve all our problems, everything is happening, so there is all these narratives in which AI is going to shock in us. Everything AI is going to do is going to be better, is going to be an improvement, an implementation, and so on. And I wonder, artists, so to speak, they have to respond to the same sort of narrative in a way to be able to legitimize themselves in society. So I'm not surprised that the first AI artwork was like sold for millions of dollars, by the way, by Christie and Sotheby's, which are the two main action houses, on which if you're an artist, if you don't go there, you're not legitimized and your artwork are not sold, basically. And then it goes down and down and down. So I was wondering, maybe we can talk more about creativity in the sense of also looking at what is not usually seen or is what is hidden, so to speak, because I also think what is interesting in AI is what behind the scene. Not that like we are going to have robots that are going to do things, because we already do. What is interesting is how these data are handled, for example, how it all started and what's behind. So, for example, how this Internet of Things works, what it means we are all connected, really. Like if someone, like an artist, can hack the system, for example. So I think in this sense, paradoxically, even if you don't feel it that way, it sort of starts a way of thinking which is a bit differently and can be another way of also seeing creativity. I don't know if I'm making sense of combining too much layers. So that was also my question. What do you think about that? Or at least how would you also talk about AI in art considering the narratives now around? Because there is all this hype and all these sort of things. And maybe being an artist and be subversive in this sense is not doing these like amazing things that make you feel things, but they actually make you think. I don't know, it's a question. So, okay, I'll stop now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your very interesting question. A very rapid answer. In any case, everything touched by AI pushed to redefine the way the human do things, because, when AI invade the world of legal right or the world of justice, you have to reinvent what is a lawyer doing. And it's obvious that, same thing with medicine, we have to redefine the role of a doctor. Is a doctor just an information processor or is something else, and then you realize that in medicine, the empathy, the skill, the human skill is really important because AI can't do so, but you redefine your job as a doctor. And I believe that this is what's happening in art too. You have to redefine what's a real artist when you see that AI is doing a lot of stuff, which is, by the way, very interesting, not so surprising, but yet interesting. And what I just to answer to you, this is what is really missing. What I really regret, and this is what happened with OpenGPT these days, is that people are saying, "Oh, look at that! This is bullshit. It's just I remember seeing things on TV. I asked this question and he answered that, and this is just fake news." Then another one, wow, surprisingly, give me the truth, and no one is asking why is so. Why is in what case in mathematical reasoning it's just bullshit, in poetry is good, and this is what is really as an AI researcher like Geraint, it's fascinating to see that with this machine learning trends, which is the real trends these days. No one is speaking even about expert system decision processing. Everyone is speaking about deep learning, BERT or whatever neural network. That they produce things, but no one questioned them, and we just do wow. And we need a narrative these days, and we need to understand why those things are doing what they're doing. Why is sometimes interesting, why is sometimes so boring, why is sometimes so fake news, right? And this is what is even I see Joshua Benjer on TV, one of the guy who invented deep learning, even himself. He can't explain what is happening in OpenGPT. So even the best AI mind these days, but they don't understand anymore. And it's not so surprising. OpenGPT, and I give a micro to, it's I remember 1,000,000,075 synaptic parameters, how one can understand what's happening. You put all the web, you put all the Wikipedia, you put all the books, and then you have interesting stuff going out of it. But is it so interesting? We need a better narrative about it.
Thank you, Elena. Then we have one question over there.
I want to add to this question of creativity, because when we talk about these huge transformers like ChatGPT or text-to-image generators, yeah, of course they can enhance artist creativity, but also we have to think about all this data it was trained on, all these books, it's human labor, and also all these images digital artists produced, and all these images, they were scraped from the internet. And why don't we say that these artists, they have been exploited by this act? And I was thinking about how we can deal with this, from legal perspective, what we can do with this. And I thought about this project by Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst with colleagues. They created this website, Have I Been Trained? And if you're a digital artist, you can search on this Lion, which is the hugest open data set for this text-to-image generators, and you can opt out your images if you're a digital artist. But I was also thinking that if it's, I don't know, if it can help, if because Lion also, they stated that they will delete these images by digital artists. But if it will solve the issue, I was thinking, because all these images which were scraped from the internet, they were again created by some people, posted on Instagram, and how we can deal with this is my question.
Okay, thank you. So one quick reaction maybe of Eve on that, and then one question in a crowd, and then we will conclude right after. So Eve, the floor is yours.
Yes, I'll go back to the lawsuit that have been brought in San Francisco, and I'll go back to exactly what you're asking about. The artists who are suing Stable Diffusion are asking for three things. They are asking for consent, compensation, and credits. So if you want, I take that, and you probably know better than I do, and I would be interested in knowing what you think. But there might be some artists who want their work to be used to train generative AI. And then if they do, that's fine. Their work will stay in the database, and they're going to be credited and compensated. And this would be maybe a way to do it ethically. And I think that this is what the law should aim for, trying to help artists be able to be compensated, to be able to have a say in whether or not their work is used for AI, and well, making sure that they have, like, they're recognized for their work. And one more thing, quickly, in the AI Act that is actually discussed in Brussels, so at home for you, there's also a provision about deepfake that says that all artificially generated content should be labeled as such. And I think that should be something that is broadened to cover arts as well. I think that if I'm in front of something that has been painted or generated, I hear a song that has been done by AI, I should know about it, and I should be very clear that's not a real human who has done it.
Lucia?
Can I reply? Yeah, can I reply? Yeah, totally. I think that the artist should be credited and compensated, but also when we think about these data sets, there are not only pictures created by artists, but also like some people who posted images online. All these images, they're created by some people who are not necessarily artists. And I thought how we can deal with this, and I don't know, maybe I could propose something. If we can compensate in a way that when some images is generated by someone, it definitely triggers some points, some space in latent space, and then it could be like we could identify this field in this latent space, and we can like it can trigger like that this latent space is associated with some particular images, and then these people, they can get some royalties, like artists and cloud services, something like that. But it's more like a technical idea.
Thank you.
That would be wonderful.
There is
do you think it's possible, or maybe some of the researchers can reply if it's possible to work like that on level of like connecting data sets and latent space in the. But yeah, I mean. Yeah, because there are data sets. There is this Lion data set, and you can find each image on the data set. They are all labeled. They are only not only labeled, like there is a source when images was scraped, where images was scraped, and also like there is this aesthetic score also on the data set. So they all can be identified.
There is a performance right after, so I'm sorry, we will have to. Also, speaking of artists, one last question, and then we'll have the conversation after going on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
yes.
I just had a little question, but it was actually more of an example of what is happening today. So as we saw all on Twitter and also on TikTok, there are songs of other artists being covered by the voice of Ariana Grande, and it's always been generated by an AI, and it has been done by fans and also just enthusiasts online. Is there something that the artist can do to prevent that? But also, what if it's coming from a good place? As in, you have a song that you really like and you just want to hear the voice of your favorite artist sing the song. How can we just deal with it? And I also wonder all of the legal aspects. So as you said, the lawsuits in San Francisco, but also in Canada. As in, what is the steps that an artist can take, but also how we should be able to recognize that those two things, so a song being generated by AI is definitely something different than the artist performing it itself. That was my question. Thank you.
Who's willing to answer to that or react to that? So last comment, 1 minute, and then concluding words.
To try and be quick. I mean, in terms of ownership, I mean, I completely agree with the legal perspective here. I mean, whether it's art or whether it's, I don't care what. If somebody made it, then they have a right to it. And we need to respect that right, even if we mean well. Yeah. So I personally would not do the thing you were describing. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Ariana Grande, maybe too old for that. But just because I feel it would be encroaching on her right, and I personally would feel that would be immoral. Not everyone has the same moral. So I do think there's an issue there. On the technical side, it is not possible to do the thing that you're talking about currently, and because you cannot, in general, in certain cases you can, but in general you cannot tell in a deep learning system where the decisions were made and what decisions were made within the system while it is working. That's a theorem. So in general, you just can't say it came from that image or it came from that image or whatever.
But sometimes you can just see it.
Sometimes yes.
And in many cases, you can just see that.
Sometimes it's fine. Sometimes you can, but that's not good enough for the law. You have to be able to do it all the time for the law, right? You have to have a method, and sometimes it's not good enough.
For the artist that is following, I want to say a few concluding words. Thanks again to the team of IMAL, to the wonder organizers of FARI over there, to all the panelists for coming and really playing the game and also accepting to challenge each other. This was really enlightening. Thank you also to Canada. Thanks to all. Have a lovely evening and come challenge the panelists. They're here right in front of you. So thank you very much.